Hey everybody, so it's time for another redraft, and this month we are up to 2002. It's one away from the famous 2003 NHL draft that was absolutely incredible, but we got to do 2002 first. Again, these videos sometimes run pretty long, so I'll be as quick as possible with that, but we are redrafting the top 10 picks of the 2002 NHL draft. Before we start, I just want to remind everyone to please hit that like button and give this video a thumbs up. It greatly helps out the channel. And if you're new to the channel and happen to be watching, please follow along for all my hockey content this season and all year round. So the 2002 draft was an interesting one. There wasn't a ton of high-end talent. It was a pretty good draft for defensemen, however. There were some really good D-men taken in this draft. But let's get into it. Columbus held the first overall pick in 2002, and with that pick, they took winger Rick Nash. Rick Nash had a very, very good NHL career. Unfortunately, it was cut short because of concussion issues, and he did have to retire last year, which is unfortunate because he was a very, very good player. But Rick Nash played 1,060 career NHL games, scoring 437 goals, 368 assists, for 805 career points and a -11 rating. He was a winger, taken first overall by the Blue Jackets. And so, who should Columbus have taken first overall in this draft? Well, they got it right. Rick Nash was 100% the correct pick. I think a lot of times people forget how good Rick Nash was. He's a dynamic goal scorer. He had to play on some very, very bad Columbus teams, especially early in his career. So that certainly dampened his numbers a bit. You know, I think if Rick Nash had played on a better team for a longer period of time, or if Columbus was better while he was there, I think he would have had some seasons where he had 20 to 30 more points than what he did. But still, incredible goal scorer. We know the numbers. We just went over that. Just over 400 career goals, over 800 career points. Incredibly talented player. And a dynamic player for Columbus, then the Rangers, and then ending with the Bruins, but for a playoff run. But, I think he did have some tough seasons along the way where he wasn't that great, and he was kind of noted for not being great in the playoffs either. So I feel like for people who didn't watch Rick Nash in the 2000s or early in his career, people don't realize just how freaking good he was. And I certainly think he was probably the best player taken in this draft. Just a dynamic goal scorer, an incredible offensive threat. Had some very, very good seasons with Columbus and New York, and put together a great NHL career that it's really unfortunate that it had to get cut short. Moving on now to pick number 2, which belonged to the Atlanta Thrashers in 2002. And with that pick, they selected goaltender Kari Lehtonen. So Kari Lehtonen played for Atlanta, played for Dallas, put together a pretty good NHL career, a very solid NHL career. I feel like it ended very badly. Lehtonen's last year in Dallas was an absolute disaster. It did not end well. But I feel like people don't realize just how good Kari Lehtonen was, and he was an extremely solid NHL goalie. Certainly not elite. He wasn't a Vezina guy. He wasn't a top 5 goalie in the league or anything like that, but he was a very solid starting goaltender in the NHL. He started 619 games in his career, winning 310 of them, losing 233. And 67 overtime losses. He had a career goals against average of 2.71, so very respectable there. And a save percentage of .912. So again, pretty good numbers for Kari Lehtonen. He was a better goaltender than I think people realize. And he did put a solid NHL career together. However, he should not have been the number 2 overall pick in this draft. There's certainly no way that he belonged at number 2. Number 2 should have been Duncan Keith, the Chicago Blackhawks defenseman, he should have gone to Atlanta at number 2. Originally was drafted 54 overall by the Blackhawks. We know the extremely stellar career that Keith has put together. 3 Stanley Cups. Through much of this decade, has been one of the best, if not the best, defenseman in the league most years. Obviously now he's getting older. He's definitely on the back end of his career now. He's declined a little bit, but 1,102 games played, 99 goals, 490 assists for 589 points, a career plus 157 for this defenseman. Obviously, Keith is still playing with the Blackhawks, so these numbers will change. They will all increase, but Duncan Keith absolutely should have been the number 2 overall pick. With Nash going first overall to Columbus, Duncan Keith, with hindsight, should have been number 2, and he has had an absolutely incredible career in the NHL. Moving on now to pick number 3, which belonged to the Florida Panthers. And with that pick, the Florida Panthers selected Jay Bouwmeester, who currently is still playing in the NHL for the St. Louis Blues. He's had a great career for a long time now in the NHL, playing for Florida, Calgary, St. Louis. Very good two-way defenseman. He's played 1,219 career games, so over 1,200 games already for Bouwmeester, scoring 88 goals, 333 assists for 421 points, a minus 19 career rating, over 400 points as a defenseman, over 1,200 career games. Very long and solid career for Bouwmeester. At one time, he was one of those, high-end defensemen, offensive defensemen who could put up points, great skater. Obviously, he's tailed off a little bit as he's gotten older. He's settled more now into like a middle of the, second pair, third pair type role, but still very solid D-man, important guy for the St. Louis Blues, who just won the Stanley Cup last year with Bouwmeester. He's had a great career. So I agree with the Florida Panthers. They picked the correct player at number 3 overall. Jay Bouwmeester 100% belongs there. We know his career numbers. He's had a very good career. Stanley Cup winner, solid defenseman for a long time. That he was the right pick. Moving on now to pick number 4, which belonged to the Philadelphia Flyers. And they selected Finnish defenseman Yoni Pitkanen with that pick in 2002. Pitkanen played 535 career NHL games, scoring 57 goals and 225 assists for 282 career points and a minus 8 rating. He played for Philadelphia. He played for Carolina. Spent a long time actually in Carolina. Put together a pretty solid NHL career, but certainly not one worthy of being the 4th overall pick. If you're drafting in the top 5, you are looking for, a high-end player. And Philadelphia, while Pitkanen wasn't a terrible choice or defenseman or anything like that, Philly definitely could have done better. And when we think of the Philadelphia Flyers over the last however many years, up until now, goaltending is one of the biggest things that we think of. The Flyers could have had a franchise goaltender at 4 overall, and that is Cam Ward, who originally went 25th overall to the Carolina Hurricanes. Cam Ward would have been an outstanding pick here for Philadelphia, because up until now that they have Carter Hart, who looks like a franchise goalie, Philadelphia has not been able to find the answer was not able to find the answer at goaltending through much of the 2000s and 2010s. Cam Ward could have been that answer. He had a tremendous NHL career, mostly with the Carolina Hurricanes, the team that drafted him. He won the Stanley Cup in 2006, and he ended in Chicago, but he put together a very good NHL career, starting 683 career games, winning 334 career games, losing 256 and 88 in overtime. A career 2.74 goals against average, very respectable, and a .908 save percentage. And you got to remember, some of those Carolina teams that Ward was on were pretty bad. They were very bad at times. He was also on some very good teams in Carolina. Obviously, the 2006 Stanley Cup team, some playoff teams, as the 2000s went on, but then he was also on some really, really bad ones. So Ward was a great goaltender. He was never elite. He was never a top 5 guy in the league or anything like that. But for a long, long time, he was just a solid rock in goal for the Hurricanes. And that is something that Philadelphia definitely could have used through this time period, and that they did not have. So I think Cam Ward would have been a great pick at number 4 instead of Yoni Pitkanen for Philadelphia. Moving on now to pick number 5, we have Ryan Whitney. Whit from Spittin' Chicklets now. Probably getting almost more famous off the ice than he was on the ice. Whitney had a decent NHL career that was unfortunately derailed by injuries. Certainly once he went to Edmonton, it was all downhill from there. He had some very, very good early years, however, with the Pittsburgh Penguins, the team that drafted him at 5th overall. He played 481 career games, scoring 50 goals and 209 assists for 259 points. Had a -30 career rating, and he was a defenseman, obviously. Whitney had some great offensive seasons early in his career. He had some, he looked like he was going to be a star defenseman when he was with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Once he got traded from Pittsburgh, however, it was kind of downhill from there. And certainly Edmonton destroyed his career like it does to many, especially during this time period in the early 2010s. Edmonton was not a place that you wanted to be playing. And Whitney's career, between injuries and he was pretty bad with the Oilers, got cut pretty short. Now, with that being said, he certainly wasn't a bad player, but he certainly wasn't worth the 5th overall pick. With that 5th overall pick, the Pittsburgh Penguins could have had Alex Steen, who is still playing in the NHL with the St. Louis Blues. Steen has had a great career between Toronto and St. Louis. He was originally drafted 24th overall in 2002 by the Maple Leafs. Spent the first part of his career with Toronto, then went to St. Louis and has been a mainstay for the Blues ever since. Very, very solid middle-of-the-lineup winger. Never a top line guy, but a very solid winger who now plays more in a 4th-line role, but he's much older now. At times was a 2nd-line player, other times a 3rd-line player as well. Just had some great seasons, had some really good goal-scoring and point production multiple years, and just put an incredibly long and solid NHL career together. Imagine Alex Steen if he was in Pittsburgh playing with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Probably he would have been on the 2nd line with Malkin. Either way, just he could have put up some big-time numbers there, and he certainly would have been a better pick than Ryan Whitney turned out to be. Moving on now to pick number 6, which belonged to the Nashville Predators, and they originally took winger Scotty Upshaw. So Scotty Upshaw did put together a pretty solid NHL career, mostly as a 3rd or 4th line guy. He was a depth player for much of his career, pretty much all of his career. Played 759 career games, scoring 138 goals and 146 assists for 285 points and a +9 rating. Upshaw was a solid player, definitely someone I would want on my team, someone who is a good depth guy. However, when you're drafting in the top 10 of the NHL draft, you're not really looking for depth guys. You're looking for a little more talent than that. And while Upshaw did have a decent career for sure, Nashville could have done better with that 6th overall pick. With that 6th overall pick, I believe they should have taken Alex Semin, who originally went 13th overall to the Washington Capitals. Now, Alexander Semin didn't have the longest NHL career, but he certainly had an extremely high ceiling when he was lighting it up with the Washington Capitals. Semin played 650 career games, scoring 239 goals, 278 assists for 517 points and a +71 rating. The winger was an elite goal scorer at times for Washington. He, 40+ goals, really, really high-end talent. He really faded out quickly at the end and was out of the league, had a very quick downfall in his NHL career, but he had such a high ceiling. and for a few of those years with Washington was one of the best goal scorers in the league. Certainly had the high-end talent enough to be a huge contributor to a team as a top 10 draft pick. So I think Semin would have been a better choice at number 6 overall, and really could have given Nashville some massive goal scoring, I think, had he been taken there. So that's pick number 6. Moving on now to number 7. Number 7 overall in 2002 was Joffrey Lupul to the Anaheim Ducks. Now, Joffrey Lupul, again, at times was a very, very good goal scorer and then had his career derailed by injuries. And, things in Toronto went very, very bad, and he was, done at the NHL level. So Lupul played 701 career NHL games, scoring 205 goals and 215 assists for 420 points and a -79 career rating. He was a pretty good winger back in his prime, but then, like I said, things went downhill very quickly for Lupul, and injuries played a big role in that. Anaheim, he was a good player, but Anaheim could have done better with that 7th overall pick. So who should they have taken? Dennis Wideman. Dennis Wideman had a much better career in the NHL than I ever realized. He originally went 241st overall to the Buffalo Sabres, but he put together a very, very strong NHL career for a long time in this league. Wideman played 815 career games in the NHL, scoring 99 goals and 288 assists for 387 points and a -72 career rating. He had multiple 50-point seasons. He had a 50-point season with Boston. He had a 50-point season with Washington. He had a 50-point season with Calgary. Multiple stops. He was a very, very solid puck-moving defenseman. His last year in the NHL was not good, and I think that's why he was quickly out of the league. But he put together a much better career than I ever realized, and at one time was a pretty high-end defenseman in the NHL, somebody who could be a top-pair guy. And, those guys sometimes are hard to come by, and he certainly had a better career than Joffrey Lupul overall, so I think Wideman would have been a better pick with that 7th overall for Anaheim. Imagine Dennis Wideman being a mainstay on the Anaheim Ducks blue line, especially through those years that the Ducks were very, very good, particularly the Stanley Cup year in 2007, and they were a consistent playoff team for the most part after that. Wideman could have been a big-time player for them. Pick number 8 in 2002 belonged to the Minnesota Wild, and with that pick, they selected forward PierreMarc Bouchard, who went on to have a decent NHL career, but certainly not one that you would be worthy of a top 10 NHL draft pick. Bouchard played 593 career games in the NHL, scoring 110 goals and 246 assists for 356 points and a +6 rating. Certainly not bad. Over 500 career games, over 350 career points. Again, none of these players so far had bad NHL careers. They just weren't necessarily, some of them, worthy of being a top 10 pick. There were better options out there. And obviously this is all through hindsight as well, knowing how everyone's career turned out. But that's the fun of a redraft. So PierreMarc Bouchard could have been a better pick with number 8 overall. And that better pick for me, Johnny Boychuk. Johnny Boychuk was originally drafted 61st overall in 2002 by the Colorado Avalanche, and he has put together a spectacular NHL career as a defensive defenseman. Big-time contributor to the Boston Bruins. Then he got traded to the New York Islanders and has been a mainstay on the Islanders' back end since, and is still a very important part of their team to this day. As of recording, Johnny Boychuk has played 692 career games, scoring 53 goals and 149 assists for 202 career points and a +137 rating. Boychuk's been a great defensive defenseman. Not a huge point producer, although he does have over 200 career points. Very, very good in his own end. Very solid veteran player now. big piece of the Islanders. And he's had a great career, and he was a bit of a late bloomer. He didn't make it to the NHL until he was a little bit older. But once he got there, he stayed, and he was ready. And he's been very, very good since then, for many years now in the NHL. So Johnny Boychuk should have gone 8th overall. Now that we know how everyone's career turned out, He's had a really good defensive defenseman career. Now, we finally get to a player that was a total bust as a top 10 pick. The number 9 pick in 2002 belonged to the Florida Panthers. They picked at number 3 and at number 9. And they drafted Peter Tkachuk. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I've never heard of this player until doing the research for this video. Tkachuk he was a center. He only played 3 career games in the NHL, scoring 0 points, no rating, nothing. He didn't make it at the NHL level, and that's obviously not what you want to see when you draft someone, with a top 10 first-round pick. So this was a huge, huge bust for the Florida Panthers. Who should the Panthers have taken? Well, remember that goaltender who went number 2 overall in real life? We haven't drafted him yet in our redraft, and I think this would have been the perfect spot for Kari Lehtonen to go. Goaltending was an issue for the Florida Panthers throughout the entire 2000s and most of the 2010s as well. This is a team that has not been able to find that young franchise goaltender. They've relied on Roberto Luongo coming back over the last few years. Then this past offseason, they got Bobrovsky. But again, they're relying on veterans. They're bringing in guys, and they don't have that franchise guy. They haven't had that franchise guy up until now, really, with Bobrovsky, that is going to be the long-term solution in goal. Kari Lehtonen would have given them a long-term solution in goal throughout the 2000s. We talked about him earlier, he had a very good, solid NHL career. Wasn't elite, wasn't the greatest goaltender in the league ever or anything like that, but a very, very solid career, better than I think a lot of people give him credit for. And, we talked about his numbers, a .271 goals against average, a .912 save percentage, 310 career wins. He could have been a good answer in goal for the Florida Panthers and should have gone to them at 9 overall in this redraft. Assuming, Cam Ward goes to Philly, then Lehtonen's the one that should go to Florida. And lastly, the 10th pick in the 2002 draft was Eric Nystrom by the Calgary Flames. And Nystrom did play at the NHL level and have a solid NHL career. However, he was pretty much a fourth liner. He played 593 career games, scoring 75 goals and 48 assists for 123 points and a -73 rating. Nystrom was really never more than a fourth line guy. He was physical. He could drop the gloves. He wasn't afraid to fight here or there. But never really developed into anything more than a fourth liner. And while he did put together certainly a respectable NHL career with over 500 games played, it really wasn't worthy of a top 10 draft pick. Who should the Flames have taken at number 10 overall? Well, Valtteri Filppula is still on the board, who originally went 95 overall to the Detroit Red Wings. Filppula has had a spectacular NHL career, probably a lot better than most people realize. He's been an incredibly solid and stable middle-of-the-lineup center, at times second-line level center, at other times third-line level center, but just middle-of-the-lineup center for a long, long time in the NHL. He's played 984 career games, scoring 188 career goals, 319 career assists, and 507 career points, and a +13 rating. He's still playing. He's back with the Detroit Red Wings this season, playing on a very, very bad team, obviously. He's still going strong at the NHL level, and so these numbers will increase. But over 500 career points, almost 1,000 games played. Filppula has been a very, very good player for a long time now in the NHL. Probably a little bit better than most people realize. And he absolutely should have gone at number 10 ahead of a guy like Eric Nystrom for sure. So There's my redraft for 2002. Next month, we will be doing the famed 2003 NHL draft, but we had to do 2002 first, obviously going in order. In real life, a lot of these, Peter Tkachuk is really the only one who didn't even make the NHL. All the rest of these guys picked did have solid NHL careers. There's a lot of them weren't necessarily worthy of being a top 10 pick type career, and there were better options out there. We know that this was a strong draft for defensemen, Duncan Keith and Jay Bouwmeester, Dennis Wideman, Johnny Boychuk as well. All, I think, are worthy of being top 10 picks and have had very, very good NHL careers. Alex Steen and Alex Semin, both I think should have been top 10 picks looking at how they've gone now. Also, a couple of goaltenders that had really good careers, Cam Ward and Kari Lehtonen as well. So, obviously, hindsight is 20/20, but this redraft, there were definitely plenty of things to change. And with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description below. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.